Hello, a public dialogue underway at GIBS in conjunction with Rios Partners, looking at some of the challenges facing South Africa, including the question of trust and how to rebuild it. Can we do it in a way that helps dialogue, helps us address some of the burning issues in this country of ours? One of the keynote speakers is Brian Whittaker. He's Executive Director of Vumelana Advisory Fund and Deputy Chairman of the Jobs Fund Investment Committee. Brian, greetings. Your subject today, the potential and limits of cooperation when stakes are high and trust is low. Surely that's something that we know all about here in South Africa, and I'm thinking 1990 to 1994?
Absolutely. I think I've lived in a high-stakes, low-trust society all my life. So we do know a lot about this, and I hear a lot of people referring back to those times in the hope that we can draw on something. And I think we should be drawing on our past, but actually I think the times we're in now are very different, and we're going to need new approaches. I mean, I've been in this for a very long time, and one of the big differences between now and the 1980s, when, for example, I was trying to negotiate lowering of rents in the Vaal Triangle while the country was burning, and now, I went through a period when I ran the business trust, and we had half the cabinet and corporate heads on that body. But I think the difference is that we now live in a democracy, and I think South Africans are having some difficulty in coming to terms with how to solve their problems in a democracy. And the attempt to reinvent what we did in the past sometimes misses that point.
Are you suggesting that we should not then be looking back?
No, I'm not suggesting we shouldn't be looking back, but I do think new generations, new people, younger people, and new ideas and creativity is going to be needed now as it was then. So I think there are things that we can draw from our past. If I think of the experiences I've been in, certainly the position of interlocutors, people who can cross boundaries and cross borders. I think societies lose trust when we remove ourselves into our own groups and find it difficult to move out of those groups. We find it difficult to cross the borders. So I'll trust you if you're my brother, or if you live in the same neighborhood, or if I know you very well, but if you're not in that category, I'm going to not trust you at all. And I think we do see some of that. We see the world shrinking in some ways. The world is battening down the hatches. And there are though individuals who are able to move across these boundaries and across these borders. And I can think back in the history of what I've been involved in as to how important that is. So I think we should be looking for interlocutors is the one thing that I think we should be doing.
Why is trust so important?
Well, trust, if the economists were to answer that question, they'd say trust is important because it lowers transaction costs. It makes things easier to do. So if I trust you and we come to an agreement, we shake hands and you do what you said you will do and I do what I said I would do, and that's fine. If I don't trust you, what I do is I bring my lawyers to the meeting, we draw up a contract, you then bring your lawyers, we haggle about this, and it might take a few weeks. So there's a cost to the lack of trust, and this has been studied over a very long time. A guy called Robert Putnam studied this in Italy, where he found that the levels of trust in northern Italy were much higher than in southern Italy, and economic growth and development in northern Italy was also better. So I think there's little doubt that trust is on the decline, that trust is very important, and that we need to nurture it. The real problem we face is how, and how do we do this now in South Africa in a new democracy. So I think some of the things we can do is we can work to try to lower the risks. People don't trust one another because they think the risk of doing so is too high. So what might that mean in practice? One of the things I currently do is running the Vumelana Advisory Fund. We structure commercial partnerships between investors and communities that have won their rights under the land reform program. Now here are two groups that don't interact very often. They don't trust one another. Communities don't trust investors to give them a fair deal. Investors don't trust communities to behave properly, and the government seems to trust neither. So what we've done in this fund is created a pool of money where we will carry financial risk for those other parties. We will put advisors together to help these people come together and structure agreements at our cost. so that they are able to enter this process having lowered the risk. So I think that is one of the things we can do.
What's the relationship between trust and leadership? And I ask that question because it seems to me that the general population has a very low level of trust in our current crop of leaders.
Yes, and these debates are bound to head in that direction. And when you think about what are we going to do to get more trust, undoubtedly the debate is going to circulate around to we're going to wait for a great leader to save us. I don't think that's going to happen. I think South Africa has had its dose of great leadership. It got us to where we are, and now in many ways it's up to us. So of course the world would be better off if we had better leadership, but if you look all around the world, waiting for a leader I think would be a serious mistake. My own reading of this is that in many ways the world looks like an oil spill. If you look from the top, you see the sludge. If you look from beneath, there is there, I experience, an enormous amount of bubbling energy. There are all sorts of people in all sorts of walks of life, in business, in government, in non-profit organizations, doing incredibly interesting and important things, trusting one another, getting on with it. And I think they should be encouraged to do more of that. And over time, I think we could build the currents that would begin to change the institutions and hopefully change the leadership. But I wouldn't hang around waiting for leadership to get us out of this. We're going to do this ourselves.
Brian Whittaker, an enormously difficult task. We wish you great success. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks.